This Choircast podcast is brought to you by The Collective. At The Collective, we believe that justice isn't optional, it's actually sacred. That's why we're building a growing library of progressive resources, connecting you with queer and Black-owned businesses, linking to books that challenge the status quo, and delivering content that empowers you to resist fascism with clarity and compassion. So join the movement. Support the mission. Visit The Collective, that's QUOLLECTIVE.com, The Collective, to learn more and get involved.
Welcome to the Unbelief Podcast, your journey, actually our journey together beyond inherited beliefs to a spirituality that works for you. I'm your host, Jeremy. I'm a deep skeptic, also a pastor. We can fix that later, right? No? Damn. All right, welcome to the Unbelief Podcast, and it is Christmas time, and so we're going to be doing a little bit of fun insight into Christian traditions and Christmas traditions and how they came about today. We are going to deep dive into the Christmas tree, which has always been kind of weird to me, the idea that we take a dead tree into our house and decorate it. But the story behind this, it isn't just like this Christmas tree, but there is deep theological insight that was the beginning of this and formed this into this beautiful tradition that we have. It is really fascinating because it starts with this, the story that begins with like a pope. Like, and spoiler, it's not because the Christmas tree is pagan, even though there is some accuracy in saying that. It's definitely not just because a guy named Saint Boniface invented the whole thing. You might hear that as well, online. The real story is this like 1500 year Christmas, pageant development where missionaries do religious rebranding. German people worship in forests. And the medieval theater kids take these giant fir trees on stage. City officials yelling about illegal tree cutting. I mean, it is going to be super fun, and I think you're going to love it. So the story starts in 601 CE. This guy, Pope Gregory, he is ready to send out missionaries, and he's got a strategy for that he offers. He gives these instructions. He writes a famous letter, and one of the things he says, this is a direct quote. Well, I mean, direct quote translated into English that says, "Do not destroy the temples of the gods, but only the idols within them," right? He's saying, don't burn down their sacred places, repurpose them. Like, go into these places recognizing that God is already at work there, and keep the festivals, keep the cultural rhythms, keep this site, and just like explain to them that what they have been worshiping is God, and here's the one true God. And so this really becomes Christianity's operating system for spreading the story of Jesus into these local places and helping people reimagine this worship as worship of Jesus. Now, I know there's all sorts of problems when we think about what that means in the modern world and cultural appropriation. I get that, but we're going to steer clear of that so that we can tell this story. So once these missionaries begin to head north, this strategy becomes the quiet foundation beneath everything that comes next, including the tree practices. So before the 700s, the world in which these Christian missionaries are walking into, trees are a really important of their spiritual practice. So the missionaries arrive in Northern Europe, and they discover a religious world built around sacred groves and sacred trees. Sacred trees aren't symbols. They are sanctuaries. People gather under these vast oaks and lindens to sacrifice, to swear oaths, to settle disputes, to hold winter festivals and consult gods and spirits and even conduct tribal politics. And when you look at that and the way that the church is being used in that moment, this is the same thing. And at that point, cutting a sacred tree is considered an act of violence against the deity associated with it. So Christianity isn't entering a place where God has not been recognized and people are not spiritual at all. It enters really a forest cathedral, thousands of years old, where people have been worshiping for a long, long time. And the Christmas tree miracles sort of begin to bloom in that world. So the Christians come in, and this Christian imagination responds to this tree-centered world by producing stories where trees act sort of as Jesus' helpers instead of rivals. There's this Gospel of Pseudo Matthew that describes the Holy Family resting under a palm tree. And then baby Jesus in that story says, "O tree, bend your branches and refresh my mother with your fruit." The tree bends and offers fruit, even produces water. And these stories are not replacing the sacred grove tradition. They're sort of reframing it, right? Redirecting these older instincts toward the deity to Christ. Now, trees aren't divine in this sense. The shift is saying that the trees recognize the divine. And this becomes, there's this guy, Boniface, and he there's a story of him at the sacred oak at Gesamar. And Gesamar is in central Germany near modern day Hesse. And in this story, Boniface challenges this sacred oak of Donar. Wilbald's Vita Bonifati in 760 has this quote. He says that Boniface chops once, and then a divine blast knocks the tree down, and then he creates a chapel out of the oak wood from that tree. Now, as this story progresses into sort of a bigger legend, there is a fir tree that grows out of the south stump, and Boniface blesses it and begins to advise families to bring fir trees into their homes as a symbol of Christ. None of these are in the original account, right? They grow later as Christians try to explain the tree and this practice of bringing trees into the home. But this is in the early 700s. Okay. So this practice goes way, way back. So when you blend that Christian imagination with the long-standing sacred grove traditions in Northern Europe, trees start to become like full-on characters in the winter folklore. Right? In the 1100s, medieval Europe's Christmas tree folklore really begins to blossom. Really across medieval Europe, right? You have in England in the 1100s to the 1400s, a myth of a cherry tree from the Cherry Tree Carol that shows a tree bowing to Mary. In the 1430s in Nuremberg, The Chronicle claims that an apple tree blossomed on Christmas Eve. Glastonbury, England, there's this famous thorn tree that supposedly blooms every Christmas morning. And these trees sort of become emotional co-stars in the nativity season. One of my favorite legends is that when Jesus was born, that actual moment, all the trees shook off their snow and ice and began new buds appear like it was spring. Like this idea that the whole world is involved in celebrating and recognizing the birth of Jesus. And as these tree miracle stories keep spreading from the blossoming apple trees and all of that stuff, by the time we get to the medieval theaters in Alsace and the Rhine Valley, the culture is ready for trees to take center stage. And trust me, the theater kids do not disappoint, because this is when we get the first decorated fir tree that looks anything like what you and I would call a Christmas tree. So in the Rhine Valley, Strasbourg, Freiburg, Sélestat, guilds hold massive mystery plays like on December 24th, and they react Adam and Eve so that we need the tree of knowledge. And apple trees are dead in December, so the prop department says, evergreen fir, let's go. They decorate it with apples and communion wafers, temptation and redemption symbology side by side. And the families watching the plays love the symbolism and start taking the idea home, setting up their own paradise trees with the apples and communion wafers as decorations. And once these household trees exist, the tradition really starts to spread fast enough that the city officials start noticing and complaining. 1419, we have the first documented Christmas trees in Alsace, Germany. 1419, Freiburg, Germany, hospital puts a decorated tree with gingerbread, apples, nuts, tinsels, wafers. 1494, a clerk, Sebastian Brandt, complains residents are cutting down too many young firs. And then in 1521, Sélestat has a ledger and uses the phrase Christmas trees and pays guards to protect local forests, showing like how widespread this custom has become. And then 1539, big moment in the Strasbourg Cathedral, a Christmas tree appears inside the theater. And it gets so bad that in 1561, there's a law restricting one small fir tree per family. The diarist writes, they set up fir trees in their parlors and hang thereon roses of colored paper, apples, wafer, gold foils, and sweets. And so once the tree is established across the Rhine Valley, it's ready to go global. And it will, thanks to Germans and royals and electricity. So 1600 to 1700s, Protestants center the tree in their family devotions. They have candles, scriptures, hymns about it. It moves to England in the 1800s when Queen Charlotte, who's a German-born queen, brings that over into the royal court. And then in London, Illustrated London News prints a drawing of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert with their Christmas tree. This is the viral moment, the Victorian viral moment. And so then in the late 1800s, it crosses the pond because German immigrants spread the custom across American towns and cities. And then 1882, New York City, Edward Johnson, Edison's colleague, strings the first electric Christmas lights on a tree in his Fifth Avenue home, which brings us to today. where every December, like millions of people unknowingly participate in a tradition shaped by monks and pagans and actors and immigrants and royals and inventors. And the Christmas tree is beautiful. The story is brilliant. The Christmas tree isn't pagan, but it's not purely Christian. It's really like this evolution, a collaboration across cultures and centuries. And I love the way it really tells a story of Christianity that shows we are about engaging with culture. It shows this idea that God is active everywhere, and this deep Christian belief that, like, just because somebody isn't worshiping Jesus, it doesn't mean that they're not connected to God and worshiping God. It has this cosmic sense to it, right? Oftentimes, faith and Christian faith centers on people and individuals, and this brings in creation itself into the story. How we aren't separate. We are part of creation, and creation itself gives us all kinds of beauty and imagery. And the evergreen, particularly, that symbol, the symbol of, in the dead of winter, these trees that still have life, man, that is helpful. Because I'm going to be honest, for a lot of people, the Christmas time is difficult. Because holidays are hard. And a Christmas tree is a symbol that even in the dead of winter, even in the hardest times, there is hope. There are things that are growing. There are parts of life that still have their leaves. And that we can get through this darkness, this winter, and move forward. We can be an evergreen that lasts through it. And man, I'll tell you, I've had a bunch of those holiday seasons, a bunch of those moments where I needed the Christmas tree. I needed the symbol of life, the symbol of hope, this thing that had cheer, but also the fact that when we decorate a Christmas tree, we are participating in something much bigger, in a tradition that has traveled continents and century, shaped by everyone from the Pope to ancient Germanic tribes to medieval theater kids and Victorian influencers to Edison's lab. Like, honestly, we are participating in something vast and beautiful. And so, whether Christmas is hard or easy for you, I want you to find a time, a way to decorate a Christmas tree. But not just to decorate it, but to decorate it as an act of spiritual connection. Whether or not you're a person that believes in God, but the idea that, like, bringing this in our homes can every day remind us of the hope in hard times. And if you have those ornaments that have been passed down, it's also an opportunity to tell those stories. Like the stories I've told you from the past, but the stories of our ancestors. I've got a Christmas ornament that's a tree that my grandmother made when she was very poor. And she had a piece of cardboard, and she washed out eggshells, and she used the eggshells to make the Christmas tree look really pretty. And she cut up little tiny pieces of ribbon and glued them on. And it reminds me of my grandmother, who persevered through World War II when her husband was gone. And then when her husband came home and was wrecked by the psychological effects of that war, continued to find hope. Man, yeah, I can tell you the Christmas tree can be powerful and really healing. And so I hope you have a Christmas tree. And if you're in a hard place and you need that healing, you need to process some Christmas tree stuff, I tell you it's easy to process it with a community of people. And we have that. We call it Not Church. And Not Church is it's a place where people in all kinds of spiritual states, right? People who don't really believe in God, people who do, but all of us are coming together to like support people, support each other when medical stuff happens, support each other when we get a new pet, support each other with all of the things of life, and talk about spirituality and grounding and how we can find hope in hard times. And I think you would love it. Yeah. You can go to patreon.com/skepticpastor. It's $3 a month. And, because we don't ask you for donations, but if you need to get in free, you can just message me and I'll get you in for free, because man, a community in these kinds of times can be everything.
That's it. That's the podcast. Shout out to the Choir Network, to Patheos, to Matthew and Keith, who make everything happen. Now, get out of here. Go do something to make the world a better place. Okay? We'll see you next time.